Hi, and welcome. This is John March.
This is Jamie Kine.
And this is John.
And Jamie.
And this is Guitartalk.
Welcome.
Welcome. This is a show for people who essentially have either no lives at all,
or are complete guitar geeks, or both.
Which is probably generally going to be the case.
Yeah, so this is a forum where we're going to talk about a lot of things, well, pretty much everything related to guitar, or I should say everything that we talk about will be related to guitar.
In some shape or form.
In some way.
Jamie is a wonderful guitar player who's been touring recently with the Zappa Plays Zappa project and has been a session player in Los Angeles forever. One of my dear friends for the last 20 years. And we were also fortunate enough to both be very long-term students of the late and great Ted Greene.
And John also is a fabulous guitar player, plays in many wonderful projects, great player. Tremendous chord guy, harmonic vocabulary from hell. And
from hell, chords from hell. Dun, dun.
So, we're going to touch on all of that.
Yeah, I think the idea is that we want to be able to actually have conversations which are almost entirely meaningless to anyone other than people who are obsessed with either gear, strings, picks, amps, pedals.
Yeah, guitar. Yeah, guitar tone, performing. The music business, any aspect of guitaring and
recording,
music making, recording,
production, trying to sell your crap when no one's actually interested in ever hearing it.
Geeky gearhead stuff like microphones, recording techniques, and all that. Basically, we're just going to be talking about what it is that we have come across in our experience and what works for us. Because
wait, stuff works for us?
Nothing's really worked for me as of yet, but the things that I like. I can speak to, and that's about all that I can speak to.
Yeah, I think we're both going to have super opinionated perspectives because if you were to put any two guitar players in a room with the same exact rig, you could not get two people who will sound absolutely different on the exact same rig. He will sound wonderful and sort of amazingly slick and cool and tremendously in control, and I will sound like a bludgeoning beast moving through a china shop with a large, blunt object.
But the same can be said for any two players. You can take like a great Marshall and line up 10 players. They're all going to sound different through it.
Yes, and in fact, that will probably be one point, a conversation we have about the idea of tone and touch and the sort of overall ridiculousness of gear acquisition syndrome when you have guys like, for example, Robben Ford, who can pick up a broom and pretty much sound like Robben Ford every time he picks up that broom.
Right. And so, that's just how it is. So if, you're not into guitar or you're not into that aspect of it and the geekery of it all, then this probably won't interest you. And maybe it won't interest you anyways, in which case, you can tune out right now.
Yeah, turn the dial. You know what? Just turn us off. Just turn your dial off and go away.
Turn to another show.
Yeah, turn to another show because we aren't interested if you're not completely obsessed with guitars and all things guitar. Okay? So that's our basic premise.
But today, our top. What are we going to talk about today? I don't even know. We have a topic. What's winging it?
Well, I was thinking one of the things one of the things that you and I happen to love and have a great love for is harmony and chords, specifically from having studied with the late great Ted Greene, one of our mentors and heroes.
I see.
And I was thinking maybe we could talk about the idea because a lot of the guys in a lot of the shows are all talking about super uber chops and Yngwie-ness and the whole way to shred. And I find that one of the things that's really lacking in most guitar players is the ability to actually play chords like a vocabulary of chords. Which by the way, I think this idea of vocabulary is a really interesting thing because it implies that we're actually having a conversation musically.
Okay.
So what do you think? Like all chords? Right. What are your thoughts?
Sure.
Okay, so how do you build a chord vocabulary? How do you actually do that?
Wow, that's a question that's hard to address in one short sentence.
Well, let's stop and let's just turn this thing off and let them go on their way.
Okay.
What do you think?
We'll let you guys ponder that.
You
well, in my experience with teaching students, the way that I would usually do it is I would start them with a few nuggets, a few basic chord forms.
Shapes. So you go with shapes. Okay.
Well, I don't like calling them shapes because just it's sort of, I have this sort of personal issue with the word shapes, but you can't really escape it on the guitar because because it really is just kind of a nature of the instrument.
It's a geometric instrument.
Yeah.
It's a geometric instrument.
But I personally have sort of strived to get away from any shape-based or pattern-based playing, even though you just can't avoid it. But, it's just my own little thing.
Well, you can, but you have to reapproach the instrument. Like one of the things I studied with Mick Goodrick when I was a kid, and he had this great idea. He said that instead of thinking of the guitar as one 6-stringed instrument, you think of it as 6 1-stringed instruments.
Right.
And Ted and I had a lot of talking about that. He said a lot of the ways he sees chords is he sees them as the relationships of one voice to another, 6 singing voices.
Yeah, he would always talk, and when he spoke in terms of chords, he would talk about the individual notes within the chord as voices.
Yes.
He would always refer to them as like, and he would talk about them in terms of like the alto voice, the tenor voice, the soprano voice, the bass voice. And he would arrange chords. When he was describing how he was voicing a chord, he would say, I'm voicing this one, A-S-T. He would use like those abbreviations and things like that. Anyone that ever studied with Ted for any length of time and got into the minutia of chords probably encountered that. But that's an interesting way of looking at it, because literally they are like, separate voices.
Because most people, I think, as young guitar players, they get stuck in the shape perspective,
right? And
they map it out so they know, well, if I know this shape, then it's this shape somewhere else.
Yeah. And
what ends up happening is you get this very blocky sort of approach to guitar playing that's kind of like, well, I can play these physical gestures and it will function as the sound harmonically, but it doesn't really integrate with how maybe music can be approached, with a more fluid sensibility.
Right. I do think that there is value in learning that. Like when I learned how to play and I was younger, I have told this story a number of times to students, and it's true. I had one of those chord dictionaries. It was like, 1001 guitar.
I remember the Melbay thing.
Yeah. 1,000, but they were the skinny little, like almost like a pamphlet looking
with the
thing.
grid. I remember that.
And like 1001 guitar chords. And I remember being so overwhelmed and looking, it's like, how am I ever going to learn 1001 guitar?
But there were only really like 80, and they were all just in different keys.
Well, right. And then they had them broken up into movable chords and non-movable chords. And then after I kind of got into that a little bit, I discovered that it's like you would have like, an E chord and a G chord and an A chord and a C chord and a D chord, etc. And then those were your non-movable chords, because, like if you just take those, like the 3 notes of a C chord, and you slide it up a half step, it's like all of a sudden it's going to sound like with these weird dissonances in it. Actually, I've kind of grown to enjoy those sounds now. But at the time, when your ear is really undeveloped, you're like, whoa, what the hell is that?
But that's a good point. Don't skip that. So that's an important point. Part of the vocabulary aspect of getting a harmonic vocabulary is the relationship of your ears, what you're hearing, with what the map is that you've been given for the song, right? I mean, if you're going to apply, because we're talking about developing a chord vocabulary, we're talking about the application is you develop voicings on the instrument that allow you to play songs, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the function of it.
Yeah. And, so anyways,
Did I derail your train of thought?
I
derailed you?
But that's all right. But that's all right. I'll get back to it.
I feel like I've derailed you.
But you have these chords, and then basically what it sort of dawned on me is like, well, there's these 5 chords, like this E, G, A, C, and D sort of, shapes, if you will, or forms. And then the non-movable chord, or the movable chords, were the bar chords, the chords that were effectively the same geometric shape, but just up in a different spot on the neck, and you had your index finger acting as a capo or a bar.
Right.
So that was sort of formed the basis of how I then started approaching the guitar years later. And this is like within the last half dozen or so years. I started hearing this term, the caged system.
Yeah, I heard about this when I was at MI with you. So they tried to get me to learn that.
The caged system. And it's basically what it is that way. It's 5 chord forms, E, G, A, C, and D.
Right.
If you rearrange those chords in terms of, C, A, G, E, and it spells out the word cage.
Right.
So it's just, that's what it is. It's the way that I learned, and I think it's the way a lot of people learn. But someone thought to just kind of apply the name, well, if you rearrange them in this order, it spells out the word cage, and I'll call it the cage system. And now it's just a system of 5 basic chord forms that everything else is kind of based off of.
No, but does that so because I never learned cage, okay?
But you did.
Not intentionally, because
neither did I. But that's how I learned.
Okay. But when I play, I have 2 concepts in mind. I'm looking at the soprano note and the lowest note.
Yeah, but when you were 9 years old and you were learning chords, you're not thinking in terms of soprano and bass.
No, that's true.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the basis for forming a vocabulary of chords, or building a vocabulary, generating a vocabulary of chords over time. And it's like, so I'm saying there is value in learning these real rudimentary types of approaches, because from there you can then springboard into like, okay, now that you know these chords, then you start understanding, well, this big 6-note E chord is really only 3 notes. It's a root, it's a third, and a fifth.
Okay.
And it's arranged in this arrangement of notes that we refer to as the voicing. And, once you start understanding that, then you can start getting it. You can make that leap into thinking in terms of, the soprano voice, the tenor voice, the alto voice.
See, now just to be contrary, because that's kind of why we're here.
Sure.
I actually teach the almost exact opposite, which is because I don't understand caged or teach that way. What I actually teach guys to do.
But see, I got to stop you. Because to say you don't understand caged is disingenuous.
Okay.
You do understand.
I do understand caged, but I don't use it.
You've been playing guitar for like 100 years. You understand.
I'm old
you
now.
understand C,
He's going
A,
to
G,
the
E,
old
and D.
stuff. I'm going to,
that's all there is to it. There's nothing else to the caged.
There is true.
It's
there's truth
five,
to that. There is
five chords arranged in that order.
There is true. Okay. But my framework when I talk to guys about this is because I get asked a lot actually about my chord work because I'm not the strongest of soloists, but I can do like harmonic stuff that's strong. And when I'm teaching it, what I talk to guys about a lot is color. And I say, what is the sound that you like when you first started playing the guitar about an open D chord in the second position? Why do you like that? And I say, well, isn't it interesting how it sounds different when you play it on the 7th fret and you bar the 7th fret? Or when you play it on the, the 10th fret, was it the 12th fret, and you play the exact same notes, 12, 12, and 11, up on the, A, D, and G string. It's the same exact notes, but the color of it changes completely. Am I correct? I think that's right.
Right, yeah.
A, D, F sharp, right?
Yeah,
A, D, F sharp.
You're playing the exact same notes, but you're moving them up to different string groups.
Yeah, and the density, the string shading, the colors. And I say, well, what I suggest to guys is doing is, I'll actually do is, I have them look at the guitar, and I say, first look at the guitar and see only the natural notes on the guitar, one string at a time.
Yeah.
And I'll say, okay, look at it. So like you're looking at the white keys of a piano.
Right.
And then I'll say, so once you can see the white keys of the piano, and then where, obviously wherever the white keys aren't are the black keys of the piano, and those are sharps and flats.
Yes.
And so what's happening is I try and point guys to this, and I say, let's look at chords together, major, minor, and dominant, which are the 3 sort of basic approaches that I look at.
Right.
And say, how do you find those colors in groupings around the neck? And I'll start with picking a song, and I'll say, let's take that song group, look at the 3 or 4 basic chords, and then try and find different ways around the neck to play those same chords. And then I'll start adding color. And what I'm trying to do is break the geometric pattern and say, that it's not shape-based that I'm looking for, it's color-based. And the sound that I'm looking for and how one sound leads from one to the other. And what happens after a period of time is you start to realize that you're not so much trapped with the geometry of it as you can do with what your ears are telling you works.
Yeah.
Because you start to see how the neck integrates into colors. That's the way I'm looking at things.
Yeah, no, that's a great way. That's a great approach. And that's something that is, I think, a little bit, again, would be a great approach for someone that already has a basic handle on, on the basics of the basic chords, knows their basic major and minor and dominant open chord forms.
That's true. That's true, because I've encountered people who don't get the difference in that.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little heady for someone who's, like 10 years old and just starting to learn guitar. And
so let's approach that. So if you're 10 years old and you're listening to our show, what we've just talked about is this the very beginning idea of how you develop a chord vocabulary, which is, in our opinions, equally as important to being a shredder or a soloist.
Yes.
I would think.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. And it's an underrated aspect of guitar playing, which is rhythm and accompaniment and harmonic vocabulary. You don't see piano players going, oh, I'm just going to be able to play with my right hand and not be able to comp. It's, there's a sense of how harmony and chords come together. So as a beginning sort of thing, Jamie and I are touching on this idea. There's a lot of approaches, but the idea is to develop, a beginning place that lets you explore the guitar and start to develop a vocabulary, which is the thing we started our conversation with, a vocabulary. Like you're having a conversation with someone. If I could only say to Jamie, sit, couch, yellow, shirt, small, table, it's not really conveying as much as, hey, Jamie, I like the yellow shirt you're wearing and this couch is really comfortable. I'm glad we can set the computer down in front of us and have a talk. Right? There's a vocabulary aspect to that sentence that made sense. So this is basically our show. This is John and Jamie
talking about guitars
and all things in between.
Yes.
And we're here, and we'll probably be back. I would imagine.
Thanks for listening in.
Or not, because some people may have turned off at the very beginning when we said to get the hell out of here.
No, what they've done is they've called all their friends, and now they're listening.
Really? You think this is
just blown up? It's blown up.
You think so?
Blown up.
Because I know for a fact at some point, if it really blew up to like more than 2 people, we might even take callers.
Yeah, we need to take some callers.
We'll take some callers. Yeah. So next episode, every episode is going to be me and Jamie sitting here kind of shooting the shit and talking about what we think is important and maybe not so important, and agreeing and disagreeing a lot, and kind of guitar geeking out. So thanks for tuning into Guitar Talk, and we'll see you next time around.
Peace.
Out. We're hip, aren't we? Oh, that's You've been listening to Guitar Talk. This is a project that was conceived, written, recorded, and performed by John March and Jamie Kime. Copyright June 2012. All rights reserved. Duplication and performances by permission only.